Hey guys, welcome back to the Fantasy Football Endgame. It is the preseason, not much longer though. The regular season's finally here, but it is still fantasy football draft season. I know a lot of you like to draft really up until the last day possible. That's smart because we've had more injuries, of course, to running backs. So we're going to give you one final look at our running back rankings in the preseason. J.K. Dobbins looks like he's out for the year. Travis Etienne also. We've already lost Cam Akers. So let's see how that shakes things up. We're going to give you our top 24 running backs. So, Chris, thankfully, the top 5 hasn't changed. No injuries to these guys. Of course, CMC is our number 1. We know that. Dalvin Cook, solid at number 2. And then at 3, looks like we're in lockstep here. Have Alvin Kamara both at number 3. And then we just switch up a little bit where I have Derrick Henry at 4 and you have Barkley at 4. I have Barkley 5. I know you've been a big proponent. You're not worried about Barkley and his health at this point, and it looks like he's good to go, even though he hasn't played in a game. That's actually probably a good thing because why would you play in a preseason game? So Barkley, solid number 4 for you.
Yeah, solid number 4 now. I moved Alvin Kamara up ahead of him with the Jameis Winston news that he will now be the Saints starter, at least in the beginning of the year. I think that's better for Alvin Kamara because, you know, with Taysom Hill, we know at a minimum he's going to vulture touchdowns. He's probably not going to dump it off as much, whereas Jameis will. And I also think you got to factor in the Michael Thomas injury is going to help Kamara as well. So with that news, I have moved Alvin Kamara up ahead of Barkley at number 3. But yeah, it's looking as good as it's ever looked for Saquon Barkley this year. I still think he's going to be a league-winning running back this year. I think people are too worried about that knee. He looks good. He looks ready to go. Maybe he's not, at his full snaps week 1, week 2, but I think by week 3, he's out there 100% full go at a minimum, if not earlier. So yeah, it's safely in the top 5 for me.
Yeah, and we've said this before. Say it again, that as far as injury risk, every single running back in the NFL has injury risk. You got like Dobbins didn't have any issues last year and he's out. It could happen to anyone. So as long as he's good to go, and it looks like he is, I don't think that there's any issue with Barkley going forward. The upside is really unmatched by hardly anyone except for those top 2 guys, maybe. All right, so let's go through our next group here, 6 through 10. I have Zeke Elliott. You had him 5. I have him 6. And then Aaron Jones. I got Najee Harris. He just keeps moving up the list for me, not just because of injuries, just because I really think he's going to be that workhorse in Pittsburgh. And then I have Jonathan Taylor, Austin Eckler. You have Derrick Henry, then Austin Eckler. I know you've been high on him all preseason long. You have him at number 7, ahead of Aaron Jones. That I know you love the guys who have that PPR floor. You really think that Eckler is that guy that you would count on before guys like Najee, Aaron Jones, and even Jonathan Taylor?
Yes. I mean, again, we're talking about a guy who will probably almost certainly catch 80 passes, could even catch 100 passes. I know he's not going to get, 200, 250 carries, but I don't think he needs it. He's really just touchdowns away from being a top 5, maybe even a top 3, maybe even the overall RB1. I know that's, if Christian McCaffrey's healthy, he's the overall RB1, no doubt about it. But I just think Eckler has so much more upside than those other guys. And I still have Aaron Jones in my top 10. I still have Najee in my top 10. It's not like I'm off of those guys or I don't like those guys. I just don't think they have the upside, the potential upside that Austin Eckler does in a full PPR league. Now, if we're talking half PPR standard, certainly I'm going to drop Austin Eckler quite a bit. But in a full PPR league, I just think he has more upside than those guys.
Yeah, so I agree because Taylor, I agree that he does have upside there that Taylor doesn't, because we know Nyheim Hines is going to be a pass catcher, and Taylor, even though he's a capable receiver, he's just not going to be on the field all the time, and his pass protection was an issue last year, and they're going to try to keep him fresh. So I do see that. I think Taylor just has a little bit more upside on a weekly basis, and then the red zone, I think he's going to be leaned on more. With Najee, I can't have Najee lower than a lot of those guys because he's going to be the everything in that offense. He's going to be the pass catching back. He's going to be the goal line back. He's going to be the first down, the second down, third down. He is going to be the alpha in that offense. So I should probably have Najee even higher, but I think it's good right now. Keep him at 8. All right, let's move on now. Out of the top 10, this is where you might have seen a guy like Dobbins appear, at least in my rankings, not yours, but he's not there anymore. Neither is Cam Akers. So I have Antonio Gibson, Nick Chubb. You have them, but just flipped order-wise. So we pretty much agree there. Joe Mixon, we're both again, agreement there, have him at 13. And then David Montgomery, we're just one spot apart. And then James Robinson back in the mix here because of Travis Etienne's injury. You still have him just a little bit lower, but again, not very different here. Do you think James Robinson might actually get overvalued by some people now, overreacting to the Etienne injury? I mean, how much does this really change for him? Because we don't even know how much work Etienne would have gotten as a running back.
Yeah, I think we're already seeing that overreaction a little bit. I do like James Robinson. I think I have him. I definitely have him inside the top 20. I think he's 17th or 18th. I don't know. We'll get to that here in a second. So it's not like I don't like James Robinson. I just worry about Carlos Hyde because, we saw in the preseason, and we're still seeing it in the preseason, it looks like the Jaguars are going to kind of alternate these guys as far as series goes. Kind of like what we used to see with Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams, where one series it will be all James Robinson, and then in another series it will be all Carlos Hyde. I still think James Robinson plays more snaps than Carlos Hyde and gets more touches than Carlos Hyde, hence why Carlos Hyde is not in the top 24 and James Robinson is. But I do think Carlos Hyde will cap his upside. And that's the thing about James Robinson last year. There was nobody else there. He got, close to 90% of the running back touches, which is extremely rare. I don't think that's the case this year. I still think he'll be very good. I think this offense will be better. I think they will throw the ball more. But I also think Carlos Hyde will cap his upside to some degree.
Yeah, the wild card here is last year's offense. It'll be completely different than this year's offense because, of course, different coach, Urban Meyer. We really don't know what to expect necessarily, how much he's going to lean on Robinson. Last year, that's all they had. But they actually have he's supposed to be a good quarterback. He was number one overall pick. So, yeah, we're definitely not going to see last year's James Robinson. But, again, at this point, when you see the rest of the players on our list, then there are some question marks. I feel like Robinson just maybe has a little bit fewer question marks. So let's go through those. Looking at 16 through 20 here, Chris Carson, ever reliable. And I have him 16, you have him 17. There's your James Robinson, you have him 16. I'm a little lower in Clyde Edwards-Helaire. That's nothing new, of course, for me. Gaskin, Hunt, we have exactly the same. Those are those guys who have that floor in PPR leagues, but won't necessarily get as much of a team market share of carries because there's guys that are also going to take carries in that offense. And then I have Javonte Williams, who, I've been big on. You have Mike Davis there at 20. You're taking Davis over Williams because you think he's got maybe a clearer path to touches. I'm looking second half, later in the year. I think Javonte takes over that job. In the playoffs might be more valuable. Do you think Davis holds on to that job all year as the starter? Because, really, there's not much competition.
Yeah, this is actually a situation where if we were drafting in, let's say, week 9 or something, like you did a second half league, I'd probably rank Javonte over Mike Davis at that point. But right now, at this point of the season, I can't recommend drafting Javonte, over Mike Davis. When we're talking about this is probably going to be your RB2. Because as much as I like Javonte and as much as I agree with you that I do think down the stretch he's going to be a beast and win people leagues, I think it's going to take a while. And, if he's your RB2 early in the season and Melvin Gordon's getting 60% of the touches, you're not going to be very happy with that. Whereas Mike Davis, look, I don't think Mike Davis has a very high ceiling. He's not a guy I typically draft because of that, because I think he'll just be a nice, safe, weekly RB2. And I don't think that's going to change at any point throughout the season, assuming he stays healthy. Whereas I do think Javonte's upside is much higher, but it will take longer to get there. So it's not that I necessarily think Mike Davis will have more value down the stretch than Javonte, because I don't. It's just right now, it's draft season. We're talking about your RB2. We're talking about a guy you're going to want to feel pretty good about putting in your lineup from week 1. And I just feel better about Mike Davis right now than Javonte. But like I said, week 8, week 9, I'd probably have these guys flip-flopped.
Yeah, and that's what's tricky in drafting. Neither of us, if you see, to round out our top 24, neither of us have Melvin Gordon right in there. And it could be a split. It could be Melvin Gordon is the primary back the first week, second week, first half of the season. Who knows? I mean, it's not like he's dust, right? He's not this ancient running back they're replacing. He's still under contract, at least for this year. He was pretty good last year in spurts. So Melvin Gordon, actually not a bad draft pick. But again, if you're looking long term, I'm thinking playoffs. I have a guy who I think could be that league winner, kind of similar to Jonathan Taylor last year. But what if it's a guy that the first half of the year does nothing and everyone's really disappointed and then all of a sudden breaks out? But that's a gamble you're taking, and you're, like you said, you're taking up your RB2 spot. Is that what you want for the first half of the season? Is basically to be frustrated that he's not doing anything. So it's definitely risk reward here. All right, and speaking of risk reward, DeAndre Swift, we both have him exactly at 21. Even though I'd say that's still the RB2 range. I'll just admit I don't have him as an RB2 in any league. I mean, this is just too much risk. And Chris, I know you're a big fan of Jamal Williams. Think he's going to be the main back in that offense, at least initially. Are you comfortable with DeAndre Swift there still as your RB2?
No, especially with what we've been hearing. I mean, it's one thing, coach speak is something I try to ignore, but when the coaches have only talked up one guy and have only talked concerningly about the other guy, you have to take that a little seriously, right? I mean, they asked Dan Campbell about DeAndre Swift, and he doesn't come out and say, man, this guy looks great. Man, we can't wait. No, they say things like, well, we're just trying to get him healthy right now. Well, we're not sure if his conditioning is going to be there early in the season. And they talk about Jamal Williams as a 3-down back. They're what they call an A back, right? He can do it all. He can do everything. So even if you think, Jamal Williams isn't going to be the guy, he's going to have enough of a role, I think, to hurt DeAndre Swift, at least early in the year. And then if Jamal Williams ends up playing really well, and maybe Swift does struggle with his conditioning, does struggle staying healthy. This guy has had lots of soft tissue injuries in the past, which usually those are the kind of things that are reoccurring. There's no promise that the Lions are going to treat this guy as their featured back. So you got to rank him here just because when you look at the other running backs, it's hard to put anybody else ahead of him, but definitely a ton of risk.
Yeah, a ton of risk. But again, the upside, we have to admit, based on talent, is greater than anybody who's after him. That's why we both still have him in this range. And then we both have Josh Jacobs in there, kind of a decent, not exciting RB2. Of course, I got my boy Damian Harris, and I don't have Miles Sanders like you because I'm predicting Kenneth Gainwell season. We have to talk about this before we finish. Something must have got switched here because it looks like Darrell Henderson is on my list and Gus Edwards is on your list. That has to be a mistake. Look, I know you were anti-Dobbins all preseason, and now that he's gone and Edwards is a guy, you have Edwards as an RB2, and we're talking PPR, right? So what's the difference here?
Well, I would love to rank Henderson. I would love to rank Henderson above Swift where I had him prior, but they just went out and traded for Sonny Michel. And whatever you think of Sonny Michel, he's better than any veteran they could have brought in, right? He's better than Gurley, AP, any of those guys. He's going to have a role. And the reason I liked Henderson wasn't because I thought Henderson was going to be a bell cow. I didn't. But I was thinking this guy's going to get 15 touches in one of the best offenses in the NFL. He's probably going to catch, a couple passes a game. That's going to give him enough value in PPR to be a top 20, running back. Well, with Sonny Michel there, if his touches go down to 10, 11, 12, that's not really enough anymore. On the flip side, Gus Edwards, he's really the only running back the Ravens have now. And look, Gus Edwards, whether you want to believe it or not, is actually a good NFL running back. He's a good NFL running back. Now, he doesn't have that breakaway burst that Dobbins had. He's not going to take a play 40, 50 yards to the house. That's just not what he does. He's going to be very efficient. We've seen any running back in this offense, in this Ravens offense, is very efficient. And he's going to get plenty of goal line opportunities. So not going to bump him up into the top 20, top 15, like some people have said, because again, he's not going to catch any passes. But when you're looking at this point here, none of these guys have massive PPR upside because none of them are really involved heavily in the passing game anyways. So give me the guy who I think is going to get 15 touches in one of the best rushing offenses in the NFL. And for me, that's good enough to be a low-end RB2.
Right. And we've had this debate before. We had it on the Discord. I know you mentioned this not too long ago, which, by the way, guys, if you're not on there, the link is below in the description. Join our Discord to talk about all this. I see Damian Harris and Gus Edwards is similar. Edwards is a little bigger physically, but they're both guys who get chunks of yards. They always get positive yardage, don't get stopped behind the line of scrimmage because they're hard to stop. And the difference is Lamar Jackson is there to steal a lot of those goal line carries and a lot of the rush attempts. And that kind of caps any Ravens running back, which I know is one of your concerns with Dobbins. And that's what happened with Cam Newton in New England last year. I don't think Cam Newton's going to be the starter very long, if at all. And so I think that helps Damian Harris. So that's why I have Harris a little bit higher. But we shall see. Both of them really good picks as an RB2 in a non-PPR league. In PPR, you don't have that floor. Again, you're depending on touchdowns a little bit more. But that's the way we see it as of right now. Let us know what you think about our rankings. Somebody missing that should be in that top 24. Like I said, join our Discord, and of course, leave a comment here on the channel after you hit subscribe if for some reason you haven't done that already. All right, thanks and good luck drafting.